The transmission began without warning, a ripple of static across every screen, every frequency, every device capable of carrying sound or light. It was not a signal intercepted, not a broadcast pirated from above, but something forced through every channel humans had ever invented. The voices that spoke were cold, flat, mechanical, without the subtle tremor of emotion that made human language alive. They did not waste words. They did not introduce themselves as explorers or conquerors. They announced themselves as executioners. Your world has been judged. Compliance is demanded. You will surrender sovereignty, industry, and command of your species within 5 cycles of your rotational star. Refusal will result in extermination. The words were simple, clinical. The voice might have been a machine or a choir of machines pretending to be singular. Across the world, the reaction was instant and chaotic. Presidents and prime ministers rushed to secure lines with generals. Stock markets fell faster than gravity allowed. Newsrooms filled with anchors staring at the feed, barely blinking, repeating the words as though to convince themselves they hadn't misheard. In a small apartment in Karachi, a man dropped his tea, not because of fear, but because he thought he had misheard the translation. In New York, traffic screeched to a halt as the voice-over car radios blended with the horns. In Lagos, half a dozen bars fell silent. The music cut mid-beat, everyone staring at the alien decree glowing across television sets. It wasn't the threat that broke the human rhythm of the day. It was the certainty. The voice did not threaten like a tyrant. It announced like a bureaucrat. Execution wasn't promised as a consequence. It was scheduled as an appointment. The first human voice to answer them did not come from the Oval Office, nor the Kremlin, nor Zhongnanhai. It wasn't a general or an admiral or a titan of industry. It was a technician, working on the global relay meant to patch Earth's response. His job had been to test the uplink before passing it to the higher officials. He had been told to say nothing, only confirm connectivity. Instead, he tilted his head, frowned at the absurdity of the tone, and asked, "Could we make that Tuesday instead?" There was silence. Across the planet, billions held their breath. The words had not been a whisper in a chat room. They had been transmitted back, carried into the heart of whatever fleet hung above the ionosphere, waiting to burn continents. The alien voice paused. Not for long. Not long enough for comfort. Just long enough for humanity to recognize hesitation. "Your query is irrelevant," the alien voice answered. "The schedule is absolute. You have 5 cycles." But the damage was done. One phrase, tossed into the void, had rippled like a stone into still water. The technician had been dragged from his chair by superiors before he could say another word. He was fired within the hour. His name was not released, but names leak the way rivers carve valleys. By the end of the day, his question was everywhere. Memes of looming alien ships over cities carried the caption, "Tuesday works better." Protesters painted the words on signs and shields. Comedians slipped it into late-night routines. Children asked their parents if school would be canceled Tuesday. The world had been given an ultimatum, and somehow, absurdly, the first real response was scheduling conflict. Inside the corridors of power, no one laughed. Governments scrambled. The Pentagon, the PLA, the Kremlin, NATO headquarters, every command bunker filled with clashing voices. Some demanded immediate retaliation, a show of force. Others argued for negotiation, for surrender, for time. But all of them kept circling back to the same thing. The aliens had paused. The aliens had reacted. Across the stars, or so it was assumed, the Alien Council convened. They were not biological in the way humans were. They were not even uniform in form. They were a coalition of species, bound by conquest and ancient law, their hierarchy measured in survival of worlds. They had executed species before. They had demanded compliance before. Never once had they been asked to reschedule. Their debate was sharp, clipped, confused. One faction considered the remark an insult, a defiance deserving immediate erasure. Another suggested it was a tactic, some hidden code. A third, quieter faction wondered if it had been sincere, a species too bound by its own trivial schedules to comprehend existential threats. But above all, The question lingered. Why hadn't they begged? Every species begged. It was what the threat was designed to provoke. Fear, then submission, then obedience. Humanity had skipped the script entirely on Earth. Fear still reigned, but it was a strange kind of fear. Not the frozen terror of prey before a predator, but the restless anxiety of a gambler forced into a game where the stakes were infinite and the rules nonsensical. The technician's remark spread like wildfire precisely because it offered relief. In the face of annihilation, humans did what humans had always done. They laughed. They turned death into punchline, horror into meme, despair into irony. The technician, whose name was now unavoidable, was dragged into secure housing under guard. His superiors raged at him, demanding explanation. He shrugged. They sounded like debt collectors. I just thought if we're doomed anyway, why not buy a few days? His logic was thin, but undeniable. Buying time had always been humanity's instinct. From soldiers holding a last line so others could retreat, to negotiators stalling enemies at tables, to children bargaining with parents for bedtime extensions, time was the most precious currency. And sometimes, humor was the only coin left to trade it with. While leaders tried to rally, scientists burned through equations, trying to gauge alien capabilities. Astronomers scoured the skies. Military satellites tracked movement in orbit, mapping patterns too vast to comprehend. Every data point confirmed the same truth. The alien superiority was overwhelming. If they struck, no missile, no fleet, no arsenal could stop them. The only real weapon humanity had was unpredictability. That unpredictability now had a face. Or rather, a voice. The technician, ordinary and unimpressive, had accidentally become a symbol. His remark was replayed across continents, dissected in talk shows, studied by think tanks. Some hailed him as a hero, others as a fool, but everyone understood what had happened. Humanity had made the enemy hesitate. The aliens repeated their decree on the second day. 4 cycles remain. The voice was still flat, but something was different. The pause after their statement lingered longer than the first time, as though they were waiting for another response. Billions watched in silence. The technician wasn't on the uplink this time. Government officials answered instead, asking for dialogue, for terms, for clarification. The aliens ignored them. They had already been answered, and they did not know how to process it. Inside their council, factions argued louder. Some demanded orbital bombardment immediately, insisting hesitation would embolden resistance. Others claimed humanity's madness was itself a form of submission, a species too irrational to understand the weight of threat. To destroy such a species outright would dishonor the very law of dominance they upheld. Still others whispered that humans were dangerous precisely because they laughed at death. If fear did not control them, what would? The world did not sleep in the days that followed. Factories that had been shuttered reopened, not for profit but for survival. Scientists worked in shifts that blurred into one another, equations scribbled across walls and digital boards, desperate to find weaknesses in an enemy that had revealed nothing but superiority. The internet pulsed with both panic and defiance. Some clung to faith, some to science, others to humor. What united them all was the ticking clock. Malik became an unwilling icon. His offhand remark had spread beyond the control of governments. Children wore shirts with his words. Artists painted murals of alien ships with calendars beneath them. Soldiers chalked "Tuesday works better" onto tanks and helmets. He was not a hero in the traditional sense. He had not fired a shot or made a speech. He had simply reminded humanity that fear could be mocked. Yet that alone gave people courage to face the impossible. Governments struggled to control the narrative. Officials wanted order, obedience, calm. But chaos was the current now, and Malik embodied it. He sat in war rooms with generals who spoke of strategies, missile deployments, orbital scans. He listened as scientists explained the futility of resistance. Yet when they turned to him, asking what humans should say next, he only shrugged. Keep them off balance. Confuse them. They're expecting us to beg or bow. If we don't, maybe they'll keep hesitating. It was not strategy in the formal sense. It was instinct. Humanity had always thrived in unpredictability. Empires, conquerors, predators. Humans had survived them all not by being the strongest, but by being the least predictable prey. When cornered, they laughed. When beaten, they joked. When given a deadline for extinction, they asked if Tuesday was better. The alien council grew restless. Each new day brought another clash of opinion. Their laws demanded extermination after refusal. Their pride demanded punishment for defiance. But some within their ranks began to fear what they did not understand. No species had ever mocked their decrees. No species had ever flooded the void with laughter. To them, it was as though humanity had turned the ultimate terror into theater. And theater, unlike fear, could spread. Earth's militaries did not wait idly. Skirmishes flared on the edge of atmosphere as satellites probed alien craft, testing boundaries. Drones disappeared in bursts of light, entire networks fried by pulses of energy no human engineer could counter. Yet every encounter was studied, every failure analyzed. Data mattered. Information was survival. If direct strength could not win, knowledge and misdirection might. Hackers, scattered across the globe, launched their own war. Firewalls that once protected banks and governments were redirected toward alien signals. Vast arrays of servers were turned into weapons of noise, blasting the sky with streams of code, images, jokes. It was childish, some thought, pathetic compared to the power hanging above. But somewhere in that storm of absurdity lay the seed of a tactic, overwhelming them not with strength, but with madness. Malik became the unwilling mouthpiece of this chaos. Each day when the alien voice returned with its count, 3 cycles, 2 cycles, leaders pushed him to answer. He never planned his words. He spoke as any human might when cornered by authority. When told 2 cycles remained, he answered, "That's awfully short notice. Do people ever send reminders in advance?" The response was silence. Silence that carried across the globe like a drumbeat of possibility. Alien scholars debated the meaning. Was it code? Was it resistance hidden in humor? Was it weakness disguised as madness? The council fractured further. Some demanded immediate action. Others insisted more observation was necessary. A faction even suggested that humanity's defiance was a test, one they must not fail by acting rashly. What none of them admitted aloud was the one truth they all felt. For the first time in centuries, they did not know what their prey was thinking. In underground bunkers, leaders argued endlessly. Some pushed for a show of force, to launch every nuclear weapon at orbit in a suicidal gesture of defiance. Others begged for negotiation, pleading to offer resources, territory, servitude if only humanity could survive. But the people outside those bunkers had already chosen their path. Across cities, defiance spread not through armies but through art, music, laughter. Streets echoed with chants mocking the ultimatum. Towering murals depicted alien ships as circus tents. Videos of soldiers dancing beneath alien shadows went viral. To an outsider, it looked like madness. To humanity, it was preparation. If fear was inevitable, then they would master it by making it ridiculous. Malik could not walk the streets unnoticed anymore. Everywhere he went, people treated him like a leader, though he felt none of the certainty they imagined in him. He was a man who had stumbled into history by speaking too casually. Yet that very ordinariness made him powerful. He was proof that resistance did not require power, only audacity. And so he kept speaking, kept taunting, kept buying time. The aliens attempted to answer with intimidation. On the eve of the second cycle, their ships descended lower, visible in the skies above every continent. They did not fire, but their presence was overwhelming. The air trembled with their energy. Shadows of impossible size swept over oceans and cities. It was meant to terrify. It did terrify. Yet within minutes, humanity adapted the fear. Social feeds filled with images of the ships captioned with jokes. UFO? More like RSVP. At least they're punctual. The very terror became raw material for humor, and the aliens found themselves locked inside their council. Cracks deepened. The execution fleet was ready, weapons primed. But the question gnawed at them. Why did fear not work? Every other conquest had unfolded the same. Threat, submission, domination. Humanity broke the cycle not by strength, but by refusing to acknowledge the rules. To creatures who measured power in obedience, this was heresy. To admit confusion was dangerous, but ignoring it was worse. By the final day before the deadline, humanity stood on the edge of annihilation, yet refused to collapse. Governments had lost control of the narrative. The people themselves carried it forward, united not by leaders but by defiance. Malik stood once more before the uplink, the eyes of the world on him. The alien voice declared, "One cycle remains." He smirked faintly and said, "One cycle, huh? Fine. But don't expect us to wear our best clothes on short notice." The silence that followed was not just hesitation. It was fracture. The alien council erupted in chaos. Some demanded immediate fire. Others argued that further delay was required. Some whispered that humanity's defiance was a trap, that perhaps they had hidden weapons waiting for the moment of overconfidence. What no one among them dared say aloud was the creeping suspicion that perhaps humanity could not be ruled at all. For how do you command a species that laughs at death in a war they had never anticipated? A war of psychology. The day of reckoning dawned, and for the first time in recorded history, every human on Earth looked to the same horizon. The alien ships filled the skies like mountains torn free from gravity, their shadows stretching across oceans and continents. Engines thrummed in frequencies that rattled glass and bone. Power radiated from them not like fire, but like inevitability. It was not an army arrayed for war. It was an executioner sharpening the blade. Malik stood in the command chamber, though he still felt like an imposter among the uniforms and medals. Around him, generals barked orders, scientists rattled off telemetry, politicians clung to words that no longer mattered. The uplink pulsed once more. The alien voice returned, as empty and merciless as ever. Your cycles are complete. Compliance has not been given. Extermination begins. Billions froze. The words, though expected, carried weight that choked the air. This was the end of the line. Yet the silence that followed stretched, waiting, as if even now the aliens anticipated something else. Something from the voice that had mocked them, stalled them, confused them. Malik knew what they wanted. He leaned toward the transmitter. His voice was calm, though his heart hammered like war drums. "You know, we're still not sure about Tuesday. What about Friday instead?" The world erupted in laughter. Not because the joke was extraordinary, but because in that instant, laughter was defiance. It was humanity's refusal to bow. Across the globe, from bunkers to bedrooms, people cheered. The aliens, however, did not cheer. For the first time, the voice stammered. Just slightly, just enough for the silence that followed to feel like fracture. Your refusal is, the words cut off. The connection faltered. Malik turned away, muttering, "They don't know what to do." At that very moment, Earth's hidden counterattack ignited. For weeks, while governments argued and militaries scrambled, hackers and engineers had labored in shadows. They knew they could not destroy the alien fleet with missiles or lasers. But perhaps they could corrupt what the enemy relied upon most: their certainty, their rigid systems, their perfect order. A tidal wave of signals burst upward from Earth. Memes, jokes, paradoxes, music, coded nonsense laced with logic bombs. Billions of devices coordinated in a single chaotic orchestra. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was confusion, scaled beyond comprehension. The alien systems, designed for clarity and command, suddenly found themselves drowning in a sea of contradictions. Commands looped. Displays flickered. Warnings clashed with reassurances. To the aliens, who had ruled by order for millennia, it was as though the laws of the universe had broken. In orbit, ships hesitated. Targeting systems froze between contradictory inputs. Some fired prematurely, only to strike empty air. Others refused to fire at all, trapped in recursive loops. The council erupted in chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation, screaming that hesitation was dishonor. Others shouted that they could not proceed until the interference was purged. Their unity shattered at the precise moment they needed it most. Malik watched the screens as reports flowed in. Alien formations shifted erratically. Their discipline was cracking. "They don't know how to fight this," he whispered. The generals didn't understand what he meant, but the truth was simple. The aliens had never faced an enemy that thrived on chaos. Every other species had bent or broken. Humanity had weaponized unpredictability. On the ground, humans took their chance. Fighter jets scrambled, not to destroy, but to harass. Missiles launched, not to pierce shields but to distract, to add to the storm of confusion. Resistance cells hijacked broadcast towers, amplifying the digital flood into orbit. What had begun as jokes now became strategy. Laughter had become a weapon, and the aliens could not counter it. The alien voice returned, distorted now, the calm certainty broken. Cease your interference. Your destruction is inevitable." Malik leaned closer to the mic, eyes cold, voice steady. "If it's inevitable, why are you hesitating?" It was a knife between ribs. The voice did not reply. Across their vast fleet, commands faltered, loyalties fractured. For the first time in centuries, the Council did not speak with one voice. Ships turned on one another, accusations flying. Some sought to retreat, claiming humanity was diseased with unpredictability. Others demanded annihilation at all costs. Their unity, once unbreakable, splintered under the pressure of defiance. Humanity was still fragile. Cities still trembled under the shadows. A single coordinated strike could still end everything. But now there was doubt, and doubt was oxygen. Malik seized it. "You think you're executioners, but you've already failed. You wanted obedience, but you got laughter. You wanted silence, but you got noise. You wanted fear, but you got Tuesday." The words, carried across the uplink, spread beyond the council chambers into the ears of every alien crewman. For a species conditioned to obedience, hearing prey mock the executioners was unthinkable. Doubt spread faster than fire. What if humanity's laughter meant strength unseen? What if this chaos was not weakness, but power? On Earth, resistance redoubled. Civilians flooded networks with absurdity, children sending doodles into orbit, comedians live-streaming routines directed at alien fleets. Musicians played concerts broadcast skyward. Soldiers painted their armor with jokes. It was not coordinated, but it was overwhelming. The aliens had brought terror. Humanity had answered with theater. And theater, unlike terror, could not be controlled. In orbit, the first alien ship broke formation and fled. The Council howled in fury, but it was too late. Retreat, once seen, became an option. Others followed, some peeling away in panic, others in protest. The fleet fractured further. Malik's gamble had worked, not by destroying the enemy, but by making them doubt themselves more than they feared humanity. The remaining ships still had the power to end everything. For a moment, it seemed they might unleash it, desperate to salvage honor. But the more they hesitated, the stronger humanity grew. Every second of delay was another message, another laugh, another reminder that fear no longer worked. The executioner's blade had dulled, not by force, but by ridicule. Malik leaned back from the mic, exhaustion flooding him. He had nothing left to say, yet somehow, it seemed he didn't need to. Humanity had spoken. The aliens had listened, and in listening, they had broken themselves. One by one, their ships turned away, engines blazing, until the skies above Earth were empty again. For the first time in weeks, silence truly returned. No voices, no ultimatums, no shadows. Just the stunned realization that humanity was still alive. The people erupted into cheers, laughter, tears. Streets filled with music, with dancing, with relief. Against impossible odds, the species that should have begged or burned had survived by refusing to follow the script. Malik slipped out of the command chamber, weary beyond words. He was no general, no prophet. He had not saved Earth with weapons or brilliance. He had only reminded humanity of what it was: stubborn, chaotic, impossible to predict. As he walked through the city, strangers cheered his name, but he only shook his head. Don't thank me. Thank Tuesday.